We promised in sickness and in health, but when my physical disability stole our sex life, he filed for divorce. I've spent 2 years fighting for the stability I deserve, but my case is failing. Now, my lawyer has found the key, a single, explosive piece of evidence that guarantees I win and keeps me out of the poorhouse. But that evidence is a truth my husband has hidden from the world his entire life, his deepest, most private sexual identity. I can secure my future by exposing his secret, ruining his career, and fracturing his family forever. Or I can protect the man who abandoned me and face financial collapse myself. To win this battle, I have to commit the deepest betrayal imaginable, and I don't know if I can live with the victory. Before we begin this impossible story, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your participation is the only thing that can guide my choice. The sound of my marriage ending wasn't a shout, or a breaking plate, or a slamming door. It was the mechanical whir of the stairlift. For 3 years, that sound had been the soundtrack of our decline. It was the noise that signaled I was no longer the woman Eric had proposed to on a hiking trail in the Andes. I was no longer the high-powered architect who could dance in heels until 2 a.m. I was a patient, a project, a problem to be solved, until I became a problem that couldn't be. I sat in the specialized ergonomic chair in my living room, the one that cost more than my first car, and looked at the empty spaces on the bookshelves. Eric hadn't just packed his clothes, he had packed his presence. The house, retrofitted with ramps and widened doorways, was supposed to be our sanctuary against the cruelty of my diagnosis. Now, it felt like a sterile, silent waiting room for a life that was already over. It is a terrifying thing to watch the person you love try to be a hero and fail. When the neurological firefight started, the diagnosis that turned my nerves into frayed wires, Eric was magnificent. He was the fierce protector, the man who argued with insurance adjusters and carried me to the bathroom when my legs refused to receive signals. But the adrenaline of crisis eventually faded, replaced by the grinding reality of chronic illness. The sickness part of our vows was supposed to be a season, not a sentence. The intimacy died first. It wasn't a sudden death, but a slow starvation. The medication bloated me. The pain made touch agonizing. The spasms made sex impossible. I watched Eric transition from lover to nurse, and I saw the exact moment the shift calcified in his eyes. He stopped looking at me with desire and started looking at me with a heavy, exhausted pity. 6 months ago, he stood in this very room, his bags already by the door. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath for 3 years and finally decided to exhale. "I can't do this anymore," he had said, his voice terrifyingly steady. "I'm 42, Sarah. I can't live the rest of my life as a caretaker. I need a life, a full life." He walked out, and the silence he left behind was heavier than the illness. But heartbreak is a luxury I cannot afford. Heartbreak is for people who can walk to the mailbox without a cane. For me, this divorce isn't about emotional closure. It is about biological survival. My lawyer, a sharp-edged woman named Jessica, had laid the spreadsheets out on this table yesterday. The numbers were written in red, but they read like a death threat. "He's playing hardball, Sarah," Jessica had said, tapping her pen against the document. "Eric's legal team is arguing that the marriage was of short duration relative to your illness. They are pushing for a lump sum settlement. A clean break." I felt the familiar tremor start in my left hand, the warning sign of a stress-induced flare. "A clean break kills me, Jessica. You know the math." "I know the math better than anyone. My condition requires a biologic infusion every 4 weeks. Without insurance, that single drip costs $3,800. Add in the physical therapy required to keep my muscles from atrophying, the pain management specialists, and the mobility aids, and my monthly existence costs roughly $5,000. Eric is a senior partner at a global consulting firm. He brings in mid-six figures. His health insurance is the gold standard, a corporate shield that has kept me from physical ruin. If he succeeds in this clean break, I lose that shield. I will be kicked onto state aid, which covers the basics but denies the specialized therapy that keeps me mobile. Without Eric's support, I don't just lose my lifestyle. I lose my body. I lose the ability to transfer myself from bed to chair. I lose the ability to use the bathroom alone. I will be forced to sell this accessible house, my only refuge, and move into an assisted living facility funded by the state, where the ratio of nurses to patients is tragic. I looked out the window at the garden Eric used to tend. The weeds were already choking the roses. He promised, I whispered to the empty room, the anger finally rising through the grief. In sickness and in health. He promised. But promises don't pay for infusions. My phone buzzed on the table. An email from Jessica. The subject line read, Update, Discovery Phase. I opened it, expecting another dry legal update about asset division. Instead, there was a hesitation in the text, a digital pause before the revelation. Jessica wrote that we had received a box of digital records from a shared cloud account Eric had forgotten to scrub. Sarah, the email read, you need to see this. It changes the leverage. It changes everything. But if we use it, there's no going back. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering against my ribs, a rhythm faster than it had beaten in years. I was drowning, and someone had just thrown me a rope. I didn't know yet that the rope was a noose for Eric's reputation. All I knew was that I wanted to live. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and impending disaster. I sat at the end of the mahogany table, my cane resting against the leather chair, watching my lawyer, Helena, pace in front of the window. Outside, the city was moving at a frenetic pace, full of people rushing to meetings and lunches, people whose bodies obeyed their commands. Inside, the air was thick with the suffocating reality of my defeat. Helena stopped pacing and slammed a file onto the table. It was the transcript from yesterday's deposition. They aren't just playing hardball, Jane, Helena said, her voice tight. They are playing to erase you. I reached for the file, my fingers clumsy. Eric's legal team wasn't arguing that he was a bad husband. They were arguing that he was a logical one. They had framed my illness not as a tragedy we shared, but as a breach of contract on my part. I read the highlighted paragraph, the words swimming before my eyes. The defendant posits that the fundamental expectations of the marital union, specifically companionship, physical intimacy, and shared activity, have been rendered null by the plaintiff's condition. This is a frustration of purpose. To enforce alimony is to penalize Mr. Sterling for a biological accident he did not cause. Frustration of purpose, I whispered, the legal jargon tasting like ash. His talking about how a marriage like it was a failed business merger. Like I'm a defective shipment of goods. It's cruel, Helena admitted, sitting down heavily opposite me. But effective. Judge Harrison is old school. He looks at Eric, young, successful, vibrant, and he sees a man tethered to a sinking ship. He doesn't see a husband abandoning his wife. He sees a man trying to survive. Harrison is leaning toward a clean break ruling. The room seemed to tilt. A clean break. The law doesn't care about in sickness and in health, Jane, Helena said, her eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. It cares about financial need and marital misconduct. Right now, Eric looks like a saint who put in 3 hard years before burning out. We have zero leverage. She leaned forward, dropping her voice. If Harrison rules for the clean break, you get the statutory minimum. You keep your disability checks, and maybe a small lump sum. That's it. I did the math instantly. It was a calculation I performed every night at 3 a.m. My disability income covered rent and food. It did not cover the $5,000 a month required for the biologics that kept my nervous system from shutting down. It did not cover the specialized physical therapy that kept me out of a wheelchair. I can't survive on the minimum, Helena, I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to hold it together. If I lose his insurance, I lose my treatment. If I lose my treatment. I know, Helena cut in, sparing me the dignity of finishing the sentence. By Christmas, you'll be in a state-run care facility. The image flashed in my mind, visceral and horrifying. A shared room with fluorescent lights that never turned off. The smell of industrial cleaner and boiled vegetables. Overworked staff who didn't have time to help me to the bathroom, leaving me to wait in humiliation. The loss of my home was one thing. The loss of my bodily autonomy was a death sentence I wasn't ready to sign. We have 3 weeks until the evidentiary hearing, Helena said, checking her watch. The clock is ticking toward your collapse, Jane. To turn this judge around, we don't need a sob story. We need a bomb. We need to prove that Eric isn't just a tired husband, but a liar. We need to prove his abandonment is calculated, cruel, and self-serving. She began packing up her briefcase, the sound of the latches clicking like gunshots in the quiet room. Go home. Dig through everything. Emails, texts, old drives. If there is a skeleton in Eric's closet, you need to find it. Because right now, he's winning, and you are about to lose everything. I left the office and navigated the busy sidewalk, feeling smaller and more fragile than I ever had in my life. The city towered over me, indifferent to my pain. I needed a miracle. I needed to find a crack in Eric's perfect armor. I needed something that would force the world to see him not as the victim of a sick wife, but as the villain of his own story. I didn't know it yet, but the miracle was already waiting for me, buried in a box of digital junk I hadn't opened in years. The miracle didn't arrive with a choir of angels. It arrived at 11:42 p.m. on a Tuesday, vibrating against the nightstand like a trapped insect. I was lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan, counting the rotations to distract myself from the phantom pains shooting through my legs. Sleep had become another casualty of the divorce. When I saw Helena's name on the screen, my stomach dropped. Lawyers don't call it midnight with good news. They call it midnight when the sky is falling. I swiped answer, my hand trembling. Helena, what's wrong? Jane, are you sitting up? Her voice wasn't frantic. It was dangerously quiet. It was the voice of a woman holding a live grenade. I'm in bed, I said, fumbling for the lamp switch. The light flooded the room, harsh and unforgiving. Did the judge rule early? Is it over? No, Helena said. It's just beginning. Listen to me very carefully. I need you to suspend your disbelief. I need you to forget the Eric you think you know. She took a breath, the static on the line amplifying the silence. We hired that digital forensics team. Remember? We were looking for hidden bank accounts, maybe a mistress in the Cayman Islands. We didn't find money. We found a life. A life? What does that mean? The investigator cracked an encrypted partition on an old laptop backup. Helena explained, her words precise. It wasn't a dating app, Jane. It was a forum, a deeply private, highly vetted community for a specific, extreme subculture. It involves elaborate role play, power exchange, and a sexual identity that is, let's just say, it is diametrically opposed to Eric's brand. I sat frozen, the phone pressed hard against my ear. Eric, the man who ironed his socks, the man who worried if his tie width was too aggressive for the boardroom. I don't understand. I whispered, Is he gay? No, Helena said. It's more complex than orientation. It's a behavioral identity, a fetish, but one that requires a lifestyle to sustain. The chat logs go back 5 years, Jane. Before the diagnosis, he was already living this double life in the margins. She paused, and I could hear the rustle of papers. But here is the smoking gun. We found a conversation from 6 months ago. The week before he asked for the divorce. He was talking to a mentor in the group. He wrote that he couldn't maintain the headspace required for his identity while living in a medical facility. He referred to your home, your accessible, retrofitted sanctuary, as a cage that was suffocating his true self. The air left my lungs. He didn't leave because he stopped loving you, Helena said, her voice turning steel-hard. And he didn't leave because he couldn't handle the tragedy of your illness. He left because your wheelchair, your ramps, and your nurses were cluttering the stage of his fantasy. You were an inconvenience to his role play. The phone slipped slightly in my sweat-slicked hand. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. 4 months, I had carried the guilt of being the broken wife, the burden who had dragged a good man down. I had believed his sorrow. I had believed his pity. It was all a lie. He hadn't been mourning the loss of us. He had been resentful that my reality was interrupting his fantasy. Jane, Helena said, breaking my trance. This is the leverage. Eric's entire career, his reputation as the stoic, conservative consultant, is built on an image of absolute control. If these chat logs enter the public court record, which they must, to prove the motive for abandonment, his career is incinerated. He loses the partners, the clients, the social standing. Everything. I looked around my bedroom, the grab-bys, the medicine bottles, the evidence of my struggle to survive. Then I thought of Eric, free and healthy, complaining that my survival was ruining his mood. We have him, I whispered. We have a nuclear weapon, Helena corrected. The question is, are you willing to detonate it? Because once this is filed, there is no taking it back. You save your future, but you destroy his past. I closed my eyes. The fear of the care facility, of the cold state-run room, faded. In its place, a new feeling took root. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. Draft the motion, I said. Helena didn't knock. She arrived like a storm front, sweeping into my kitchen with a manic energy that made the air feel static-charged. She didn't even take off her coat before she slammed the manila folder onto the table. The sound echoed off the sterile countertops, a heavy, decisive thud that sounded less like paperwork and more like a gavel. "Read it," she commanded, her breath visible in the chilly morning air of the house I kept cold to save on heating bills. "Don't skim. Read." I reached for the stack of printed chat logs. My hand, stiff with morning rigidity, struggled to turn the pages. But as I read, the physical pain receded, replaced by a cold, hollow shock. It was all there. The timestamps, the usernames, the photos. The text on the page was a window into a stranger's mind. This wasn't just a hobby. It was a consumption. I read messages where Eric, my husband, the man who wore navy suits and checked his watch compulsively, spoke with a raw, desperate vulnerability about needs I couldn't pronounce, let alone fulfill. But the dagger wasn't the kink. The dagger was the timeline. "She's home again," he had written 2 years ago. "The equipment is everywhere. It kills the mood. I feel like I'm living in a hospice, not a home. I need out. I need to breathe." "Do you see it?" Helena asked, tapping a manicured nail on the date. "He wasn't overwhelmed by your care. He was annoyed by it. He viewed your survival as an obstacle to his gratification." She pulled out a second document, a draft of a legal motion. "This is the kill shot, Jane. In this state, marital misconduct is the golden key. If we prove that his abandonment was cruel, self-serving, and psychologically damaging, the judge's hands are tied. He must award punitive alimony. He must secure your housing." She leaned in, her eyes blazing. "You get the house. You get the insurance. You get the cash lump sum to secure your care for the next 20 years. You win. Period." The relief that washed over me was so intense it made me dizzy. I saw a future where I wasn't terrified. A future where I could afford the good physical therapist, the one who didn't hurt me. A future where I didn't die in a state facility. All you have to do, Helena said, sliding a pen across the table, is sign the motion to compel discovery. We submit these logs as evidence of his motive. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the logs. Helena, I whispered, the reality sinking in. Court records are public. Yes, she said, not blinking. If we file this, everyone sees it. His partners, his clients, his parents, the press. I looked at the specific nature of the chats again. It was the kind of secret that doesn't just embarrass a man. It erases him. In his conservative, corporate world, this wasn't just a scandal. It was social suicide. He would lose his partnership within the week. He would be a pariah. He will be destroyed, I said, looking up at her. Helena straightened up, her expression turning hard and flat. He destroyed you, Jane. He looked at your crumbling body and decided his fantasy life was more important. He left you to rot so he could go play pretend. She walked to the window, looking out at the overgrown lawn. He is banking on your decency. He is betting his life that you are too nice, too weak, and too noble to pull the trigger. He thinks he can starve you out because you don't have the guts to hurt him. She turned back to me, her voice dropping to a whisper. Legally, this is a no-brainer. I file this tomorrow, and the war is over. But morally, that's on you. You have to decide. Is your life, your literal breath and bone, worth his reputation? Do you save yourself from physical ruin? Or do you save the man who left you behind? I stared at the pen. It looked heavy. If I signed, I was secure. But I would have to live with the knowledge that I had taken a man's most intimate, private self and flayed it open for the world to see. I would be rich, safe, and perhaps unforgivable. We file at 9 a.m., Helena said, checking her watch. Sleep on it. But remember, Jane, he didn't lose sleep over leaving you. 48 hours is a long time to stare at a murder weapon. That's what the file on my table had become. For 2 days, I hadn't left the house. I barely slept. I sat in the fluctuating light of the kitchen, watching the sun drag shadows across the linoleum, my hand hovering over the chat logs. I wasn't just looking at evidence. I was looking at the detonator for a bomb strapped to Eric's chest. I called Helena back on the second morning. I needed to know the blast radius. I need a projection, I told her, my voice raspy from disuse. If we file this, exactly how bad does it get for him? Don't give me the legal answer. Give me the reality. Helena arrived 2 hours later with a new document. She didn't sit down. She stood by the kitchen island, looking like a grim reaper in a terrifyingly expensive blazer. It's catastrophic, Jane, she said simply. She slid a single sheet of paper across the counter. It was a summary of Eric's partnership agreement with Sterling, Vance and Associates. I had an associate pull the bylaws of his firm, Helena explained. They are an old-money, ultra-conservative institution. They handle wealth management for the church and several conservative endowments. They have an absolute morality and conduct clause. She pointed to a highlighted section. Exposure of a deviant lifestyle, and that is the language they will use for this specific identity, triggers immediate, full-cause termination. No severance. No payout of his capital contribution. He loses his equity. He loses his stock options. He walks out with a cardboard box and 0 references. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. So he loses his job. He loses his career, Helena corrected. In his industry, this kind of specific, tabloid-level scandal is a blacklist. He will never work in high-level finance again. But that's just the money. She flipped the page. The real damage is familial. Eric's mother controls the family trust. You know her. You know she views divorce as a sin and alternative lifestyles as an abomination. If this hits the public court record, she won't just be embarrassed. She will be vindictive. I closed my eyes. I could picture Eric's mother, a woman made of pearls and judgment. She will cut him off, Helena said ruthlessly. We are talking disinheritance, removal from the family foundation board, complete social exile. He won't just be broke, he will be a pariah. The room fell silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. The equation on the table had shifted violently. For months, I had focused on my own survival. I saw my slow, agonizing decline, the loss of mobility, the pain, the fear of the state facility. Eric had sentenced me to that fate through neglect. He had walked away, content to let me wither so he could pursue his fantasy. But what I was about to do to him wasn't neglect. It was an execution. He left me to a slow death, I whispered, the words tasting like copper. But if I do this, I am sending him to a firing squad. He pulled the trigger first, Helena countered, her voice hard. He knew your health depended on him, and he didn't care. Why do you owe him mercy when he showed you none? Because there is a difference between leaving someone and destroying them, I snapped, the anger finally breaking through the fog. I'm not just winning a divorce, Helena. I'm nuking his entire existence. My life savings will be built on his ruins. I looked down at the papers. The chat logs were innocent enough in isolation, just a man expressing a hidden desire. But weaponized in a court of law, they were lethal. The scales are uneven, I said. He hurt me by leaving. I am hurting him by exposing his soul. Helena packed her briefcase, the snap of the locks echoing like a final judgment. The hearing is in 24 hours, Jane. The motion is drafted. You have the pen. You can be the bigger person and lose your house, your health, and your dignity. Or you can be the villain who survives. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. Just remember, she said, looking back at me, when you lying in that state facility bed, wondering why you didn't fight back, Eric will be somewhere safe, and he won't be thinking about you at all. She left. I sat alone in the darkening house, the pen heavy in my hand. The choice was absolute. I could save my body, or I could save my conscience. I couldn't save both. The file on the table wasn't just paper and ink anymore. It was a time machine. As I stared at the timestamps on the chat logs, the sterile silence of my kitchen dissolved. The room went dark, the air grew cold, and suddenly I was back in our old apartment 7 years ago. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of night where the wind rattled the window panes like a thief trying to get in. I remembered the smell first. Single malt scotch. Eric never drank alone, and he never drank on weeknights. But that night, I had found him slumped on the living room rug, the bottle half empty beside him. He wasn't crying, he was vibrating. It was a tremor of pure, unadulterated terror. Eric, I had whispered, kneeling beside him. What happened? Did someone die? He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot and wide, stripping away the layers of the confident, corporate architect I thought I knew. Beneath the suit and the stoicism, I saw a terrified child. I can't keep it inside anymore, Jane, he had slurred, clutching my arm with a grip that left bruises the next day. I'm sick. I'm wrong. That was the night the confession spilled out. It wasn't a casual admission. It was a purge. For 2 hours, he sat in the dark and dismantled himself. He told me about the other, the identity he kept locked in the basement of his psyche. He described the specific, intense needs that his conservative upbringing had labeled as demonic. He spoke of the shame that ate at him like acid, the fear that he was fundamentally broken. He wasn't the villain then. He was my husband, and he was in agony. If they find out, he had choked out, his voice cracking. If the partners, if my mother, if the church ever saw this part of me, it's over. He grabbed my face, forcing me to look into his panic. I'm not talking about being fired, Jane. I'm talking about being erased. I couldn't survive the look in my father's eyes. I couldn't survive the shame. I would end it. I swear to God, I would end it. The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. He had been suicidal. The fear of exposure wasn't just about his reputation. It was about his will to live. I remembered what I did next. I didn't judge him. I didn't pull away. I pulled him into my arms, rocking him while he wept into my shoulder. I felt a fierce, protective love for this broken man who had trusted me with his life. "Promise me," he had sobbed into my shirt. "Promise me no one will ever know. Promise me you'll take this to the grave." "I promise," I had whispered into his hair, sealing the vow with a kiss on his forehead. "You are safe with me. Eric, it stays in this room. It dies with us." I snapped back to the present, gasping for air as if I had been underwater. I looked down at the motion to compel discovery. The legal document was a precision weapon, designed to extract maximum value. But in my hands, it felt like a violation. The evidence Helena had found wasn't just proof of misconduct. It was the transcript of that sacred, terrified confession. It was the manifest of his shame. If I signed this motion, I wasn't just a scorned wife fighting for alimony. I was a traitor. I was taking the moment of his greatest vulnerability, a moment where I had sworn to be his sanctuary, and turning it into a public spectacle. I would be exposing him to the very judgment that he had told me 7 years ago would kill him. Yes, he had abandoned me. Yes, he had left me to a future of pain and poverty. But he had left a marriage. I was about to break a covenant. The victory felt stained with blood before the battle had even begun. I had the power to save my life, but the price was becoming the one thing I promised I would never be, the monster who destroyed him. The ceasefire ended at 11:15 p.m. on a Friday. The legal world shuts down on weekends. Lawyers go to their beach houses. Judges go to their golf clubs. I was sitting in the dark, the blue light of the television flickering over the stack of evidence files, when my phone lit up. It wasn't Helena. It wasn't a spam call. It was a name I hadn't seen pop up on my screen in 6 months without the prefix lawyer for. Eric. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. In a high-stakes divorce, direct contact is forbidden. It is a breach of protocol. It acts as a signal that the walls are breaching. A text message appeared, floating in a gray bubble on the lock screen. "Jane, I know what Helena found. I know what you have. Please, I am begging you, do not use that. You know what it will do to me." I stared at the words. There was no punctuation, no corporate Polish. Just raw, unadulterated panic. Before I could even process the text, the phone began to ring. I shouldn't have answered. Helena would have screamed at me to let it go to voicemail. But the pull of 7 years of marriage is a gravity you cannot simply turn off. I slid my thumb across the glass. "Jane." His voice was unrecognizable. The smooth, baritone cadence of the partner track consultant was gone. In its place was a high, thin sound, frayed at the edges. He sounded like he was hyperventilating. "Eric," I said, my voice steady only because I was gripping the arm of my chair so hard my knuckles were white. "You shouldn't be calling me." "I don't care about the lawyers," he rushed out, the words tumbling over each other. "I care about my life. Jane, listen to me. I know you found the logs. I know about the forum." He took a jagged breath. "If that gets out, if my firm sees that, I am dead. You know I'm dead. My father, oh God, Jane, my father." The mention of his father brought the memory of that night 7 years ago rushing back. The scotch, the tears, the promise. He was weaponizing my empathy. "I will settle," he said, the desperation shifting into a frantic bargaining. "Right now. Tonight. I'll draft a memo of understanding. You keep the house. It's yours. The deed, the equity, everything." I waited. The house was the baseline. It wasn't enough. And, he added, I'll give you $20,000. Cash. A lump sum. Tonight. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. 20,000. I repeated, the number hanging in the air like a bad joke. It's cash, Jane. It's immediate. It's a life raft. A life raft. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Eric, my biologics cost $5,000 a month. My therapy is another $2. $20,000 keeps me alive for 3 months. Maybe 4. And then what? I sell the house to pay for the medicine. I end up in the state facility anyway. It's all I can liquidate without alerting the firm, he shouted, his control snapping. I'm trying to help you, but you have to meet me halfway. You have to promise me you will destroy those files. You have to promise you will never speak that name in court. I cannot live with the shame, Jane. Please, take the deal. The reality of his offer settled over me like a shroud. He wasn't offering me a future. He was offering me a severance package. He was willing to give me the house because he didn't need it, but he wouldn't touch his investments, his portfolio, or his long-term wealth, the things that would actually secure my care, because he was hoarding them for his new life. He was asking me to trade my long-term survival for his short-term comfort. He was asking me to die slowly so he wouldn't have to be embarrassed quickly. You're asking me to drown so you don't get wet, I whispered. I am asking you to have mercy, he cried. I am asking you to remember the woman who promised to protect me. I remember her, I said, tears finally pricking my eyes. But you left her behind when she got sick. Jane, please. I pulled the phone away from my ear. His voice, tinny and terrified, continued to leak from the speaker, begging, pleading, bargaining. I looked at the files on the table. The nuclear option. If I took his deal, I kept my conscience, but I lost my life. If I pressed the button, I saved my body, but I destroyed his soul. I pressed the red icon. The line went dead. The silence that rushed back into the room was louder than his screaming. I hadn't said yes. I hadn't said no. The morning sun would bring the court date, and I had to decide if I was a survivor or if I was a wife. It is 3 a.m., the hour when courage usually dies. The house is silent, save for the rhythmic, mocking hum of the refrigerator. I am sitting at the kitchen table, a single lamp casting a pool of yellow light onto the document that will define the rest of my life. The motion to compel discovery is printed, stapled, and waiting. Beside it sits the fax machine, its green power light blinking like a steady heartbeat. I am a woman staring down the barrel of her own survival. My hand hovers over the signature line. My fingers are stiff, a reminder of the disease that is slowly calcifying my nerves, but the pen feels heavy, like it's made of lead. This isn't just paperwork. It is a moral event horizon. I look at the wall clock. Helena needs this by 8 a.m. to file it with the court clerk. 5 hours. I have 5 hours to decide whose life matters more. I close my eyes and force myself to look at option A, survival. If I sign this paper, the war is over. I win. The judge will see the evidence of Eric's hidden life, the timeline of his abandonment, and the motive for his cruelty. The law will strip him of his assets and hand them to me. I will keep this house with its ramps and wideness. I will keep the premium insurance that pays for the biologics flowing into my veins. I will never have to know the smell of a state-run facility or the indignity of waiting an hour for a nurse to help me use the bathroom. I will be safe. But the cost of that safety is my soul. To win, I have to take the terrified, weeping man who trusted me 7 years ago and feed him to the wolves. I have to break the most sacred vow I ever made, a vow whispered in the dark to stop a suicide. I will be rich, and I will be healthy, but I will be the woman who destroyed a man's life because he was inconvenient to her budget. Then, the phantom pain shoots through my leg, sharp and electric, forcing me to look at option B, mercy. If I burn these papers, I keep my promise. I protect Eric's secret. I save him from the social execution, the disinheritance, and the professional ruin that Helena guaranteed would happen. I walk away with my integrity intact, the good wife to the bitter end. But the good wife will be destitute. Without the settlement, the money runs out in 6 months. The treatments stop. The mobility fades. My world shrinks to the size of a rented hospital bed in a facility where I am just a number. I trade my physical existence for a clean conscience. The irony is suffocating. Eric's sin was abandonment, a selfish, cowardly retreat from reality. But my potential sin is malice, a calculated, weaponized destruction of a human being. He left me to die by accident. I would be killing him on purpose. I look at the signature line again. The ink seems to blur. I am too close to the pain to be rational. I cannot judge the weight of my own trauma against the weight of his destruction. I am holding the knife, and I don't know if I am the surgeon or the murderer. I cannot make this choice alone. The burden is too heavy, the night is too dark, and I am too afraid. So, I am handing the verdict to you. You are the jury now. What do I do? Do I choose option A, sign the papers, expose his deepest secret, and secure the money I need to physically survive, accepting that I will destroy his life to save my own? Or do I choose option B, burn the evidence, keep my sacred promise to a terrified man, and accept a future of poverty and physical decline to save his reputation? Does the need for physical survival justify the complete destruction of another human being? Tell me, because the sun is coming up, and my hand is shaking. The dawn is breaking over the city, a pale, sickly gray that offers no warmth. I am watching the light creep across the floorboards of the house I am fighting to keep, illuminating the stack of papers that will determine the rest of my existence. The fax machine sits on the counter, silent and waiting. The deadline is absolute, 9 a.m. I have spent the last 8 chapters stripping my life down to the studs for you. I have shown you the medical charts that predict my slow paralysis without treatment. I have shown you the chat logs where my husband described my disability as an inconvenience to his fantasy. I have shown you the desperate, terrified text messages where he begged me to accept a pittance in exchange for his reputation. I have laid out the anatomy of a tragedy. Now, I am handing you the scalpel. I am too close to the wound to see clearly. I am blinded by pain, both the physical fire in my nerves and the emotional agony of a broken marriage. I can no longer distinguish between justice and cruelty. I need you, my jury, my witnesses, to make the call that I am too damaged to render. Look at the choice. Really look at it. It isn't just about money or a house. It is about the price of a human life. Choice A, financial safety, the execution. If you vote for this, I sign the papers. I fax the motion. I introduce the evidence of Eric's secret identity into the public record. In doing so, I guarantee that the judge awards me the maximum settlement. I secure the house, the $5,000 monthly medical treatments, and the therapy that keeps me walking. I choose survival. But the cost is absolute destruction. I will be detonating a nuclear bomb in Eric's life. He will be fired for cause, blacklisted from his industry, disinherited by his family, and socially obliterated. Worse, I will be violating the most sacred vow I ever made, the promise to a weeping, suicidal man that his secret was safe with me. I will survive my illness, but I will have to live with the knowledge that I destroyed a man's soul to save my own skin. Choice B, moral conscience, the sacrifice. If you vote for this, I shred the papers. I accept Eric's lowball settlement. I keep the secret. I honor the vow I made in the dark 7 years ago, proving that my integrity is stronger than his betrayal. I show him the mercy he refused to show me. But the cost is my own slow erasure. The money will run out in months. The treatments will stop. My mobility will fail. I will lose this home and be moved into a state facility where I will become just another number, another body to be managed, waiting for the end in a room that smells of bleach and neglect. I will die with a clean conscience. But I will die. There is no third option. There is no compromise. The ink in the pen is waiting. The fax machine is humming. Does the law grant me the right to destroy Eric for the sake of my own biological preservation? Does his abandonment nullify my promise? Or does a sacred, personal vow supersede the legal right to compensation, even if it costs me my life? I am standing on the edge of the cliff. Do I push him off to save myself? Or do I jump to save him? Tell me, where does the line between justice and vengeance truly lie in this impossible divorce? Voting is now open. I will follow the majority verdict. Comment A to sign the papers, or B to burn them. The sun has finally cleared the horizon. It lays a long, jagged strip of light across the kitchen table, cutting right between the fax machine and my trembling hand. The clock on the microwave reads 8:55 a.m. We have arrived at the end of the story, but the ending hasn't been written yet. For the last 9 chapters, I have been the narrator of my own tragedy. I have walked you through the wreckage of my marriage, the terror of my diagnosis, and the brutality of Eric's abandonment. I have shown you the sickness he couldn't handle, and the health he is hoarding for himself. But now, I am stepping back. The case is closed. The evidence has been submitted. The witness box is empty. This is the moment where my story becomes your decision. I am paralyzed by the magnitude of this choice. I cannot separate my survival instinct from my moral compass. I am too close to the fire to know if I am putting it out or pouring gasoline on it. So, I am abdicating the throne. I am handing the crown and the sword to you. There is no right answer here. There is no clean getaway. There is only the verdict you choose to live with. The voting is simple and binary. Vote A. Expose the truth. Choose financial safety. Vote A if you believe that survival is the ultimate moral imperative. You are telling me to sign the papers. You believe that Eric's abandonment broke the marital contract first, rendering my vows null and void. You believe that a man who leaves his sick wife to poverty does not deserve the protection of her silence. By voting A, you grant me the house, the medicine, and the future. But you must accept that your vote will incinerate Eric's life. You are authorizing me to weaponize his deepest shame, costing him his career, his family, and his mental stability. You are choosing justice, but it is a justice that draws blood. Vote B. Keep the secret. Choose moral conscience. Vote B if you believe that a promise is absolute, even when it is inconvenient. You are telling me to burn the papers. You believe that the vow I made to a suicidal man in the dark supersedes my need for financial retribution. You believe that we do not fight monsters by becoming them. By voting B, you save Eric. You grant him mercy he didn't earn. But you must accept that your vote sentences me to a slow, agonizing decline. You are choosing my poverty, my pain, and my eventual loss of independence. You are choosing mercy, but it is a mercy that requires a martyr. This is not a rhetorical question. I am looking at the comments section right now. I am refreshing the page. The pen is in my hand, hovering over the signature line. The fax machine is on standby. I promise you this, I will follow the majority decision. If the majority vote say, I will sign the motion, send the fax, and film the immediate aftermath of the legal explosion. I will show you what happens when a man's life is dismantled in real time. If the majority votes B, I will shred the document on camera. I will call Eric and accept his settlement, and I will show you the reality of preparing for a life of physical decline. The follow-up video, the verdict, will reveal the final decision and the shocking fallout of your choice. But right now, the clock reads 8:58 a.m. The time for deliberation is over. The time for judgment is now. Type A or B in the comments. Thank you for being my judge. I am in your hands.